Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the fourth day of our Java webinar week. My name is Bartosz Cytrowski, and we met 2 days ago. I will be your host for today as well. This event is brought to you by Spartes with a huge help from the awesome team of Just Join IT. And since Monday, we've already talked about microservices, performance improvements, and garbage collectors. If you missed those presentations, you can still watch them on YouTube channel and Facebook channel. Today, we pivot a little from the Java world to focus on the effective work from home. In a moment, Maciej Przepióra, who also opened this week of webinars with his presentation about microservices, will be sharing some hints and stories about his experience as a remote developer and a member of a remote team. The presentation will take around 25 minutes, and after that, there will be a lot of time for questions. You can post questions as comments on Facebook or on YouTube under the video. We will collect them and ask live after the presentation. Those of you who are with us from the beginning already know that, but we have a game for all of you. You can win some prizes. Watch out for unexpected slides during the presentation. So, Mac, the stage is yours. Good luck.
Okay, thanks. So just to give some justification why I want to talk about working from home. I have 6 years of experience in working remotely, 1 year at Spartes, some more years at other companies, and I believe I've learned quite a lot during that time, so I wanted to share that with you. And I think developers' work is a bit different than others people's work, so working remotely is also different, and that's what I want to focus on. So let's jump into our presentation plan. Today, I want to talk about 3 things related to working from home. First, how to prepare for working from home, then how to execute that work every day, and then what are the common issues that you might need to deal with when you start working from home, and how to deal with them. And then we will have hopefully a long Q&A session when we'll answer your questions. Okay, so let's jump into preparation stage. How to start working from home, how to prepare for that. So one thing that is, I think, most important, first you need to decide, is it going to be only temporary or is it going to be long-term? So when I started working from home, I expected it to be a solution for me. So I was setting my mind in that direction that I want to work from home, and this is the default setup for me. For most of people who are required to work from home nowadays, this is only temporary, and this might be actually helpful to think about this as a temporary solution, so you're not going to get stuck in it if you don't like it. But on the other hand, we don't know how much the pandemics are going to stay with us, so maybe it's better to think of it as not a temporary thing. Well, it all depends on what do you want to achieve, right? But anyway, for most of people nowadays, working from home is only temporary, and that might be some relieving thought. Okay. So the first thing I think is important to start working from home is not any technical details or anything like that. You need to talk to people, to others at your household, and explain the situation to them. Because this sets expectation on your side and expectations on your family's side, like expectations on kids' side. Very small kids don't understand that you're working from home when you're at home, right? Or you need to explain it to them. So it's very good to talk and explain that. When, for example, you're in your working place and you've shut the door, this means that you're at work and you expect no one to interrupt you, right? And so on and so forth. But this is very important that you set the expectations. Working from home is, well, we'll get to that when I talk about common issues. But anyway, you might get into a problem with distinguishing the work time and the lifetime, and having this work-life balance. But if you set it right from the beginning, it will be much easier. So really, I think this is the most important thing, to set the expectations at your household, both your own expectations and to agree to some common rules. This will make your life a lot easier when working from home. Okay. The other thing that I really recommend is reading about remote work. There's at least two interesting books that are worth reading. The most popular, I suppose, the most popular one is Year with Pants by a former Automatic employee. That's the company that's behind WordPress. So WordPress is totally distributed company, and one of their former employees wrote a book about their experience with working completely remotely in a completely distributed company. And I think this is really worth reading. And the other one is a book by Jason Fried, Remote, Office Not Required. Jason Fried works for Basecamp, and this is also a distributed company. So I've read both of those books, and I cannot recommend them enough. That's really helpful to understand what's happening, not only if you're a regular employee, but also when you're a manager and you're managing remote workers. So yeah, definitely. And Jason Fried tweeted more than 2 months ago that they will be refunding the book. So you're basically getting it for free. Go get it. Okay. The other thing, to set your mind right, embrace the situation. So not everyone will like working from home, and not everyone likes the idea of working from home. I know many people that say that I can't imagine myself working from home because I need to attend the office. I need to have all this water cooler talk and all the social interactions. Well, yes, that's right. But on the other hand, think about the time you're saving on commuting, for example. So I was working in the office for some time, like a year ago before I joined Spartus, and I usually spend something like 2.5 hours in a train just to commute to the office and then get back from it. That's quite a lot of time. Of course, this was not always because I could read a book or I don't know, learn something on the way. But this is not an optimal environment for learning, right? Or for reading. In a train, you won't always get a seat free or anything like that. So think about what are the positive outcomes of working from home. This will help you to accept the fact that you're working from home. One thing, saved time, but then think what you can do with this saved time. In my case, I prefer working from home and not spending time on commuting, because I can devote saved time A, to my family, which is very important for me. B, to learn something new. C, to prepare talks and improve myself as a public speaker. So yeah, well, if you embrace the situation and find the good sides, it will be easier to accept it. Then, more practical tip. You're going to need a very comfortable chair that you're going to sit on. So if you're working in the office as a software developer or or just an office worker, the occupational safety and hazard laws require your employer to give you a comfortable chair and an ergonomic chair that won't hurt you after sitting on it for 8 hours. So you're going to need an ergonomic chair at home as well. You're going to need it to be, well, the first and most important thing is that it needs to be ergonomic, and occupational and health safety laws, and occupational and occupational health and safety laws require that if you're a teleworker, if you're a remote worker, you still need to obey the OHS rules. So you need an ergonomic chair. You need a chair that is going to be comfortable, because if it's not comfortable, you're going to feel it at the end of the day. And you don't want that, basically. So if you don't have one, get one, and it will pay off really quickly. Then, if it's possible, it's really good to find a devoted room or a place, some kind of space that you keep for work only related stuff, like the desk. Let's say the bare minimum that I can think of is some slice of the desk where you put your laptop on, and this is only for work related stuff. This is, in my opinion, this is important because it helps you set your mind on work, and it helps you to divide or separate the work from life and keep the healthy balance between work and life. So yeah, that's something I would really recommend. Then you're gonna need a decent headset for that, because you're probably, when you're working remote, you're going to use teleconferencing software to get in touch with your teammates or managers or whoever. So if you're not working alone, which I believe is most of us don't do, then you need to communicate with people, and to communicate well, you need to have a decent headset. My personal choice is Bose quality noise comfort. Bose Noise Comfort 700. That's a very decent headset. It has noise cancellation. It has things like a Bluetooth connection and wired connection. Yeah, what I recommend looking at is either a wired headset that has decent noise cancellation, because you don't want to have any noise to interrupt you when you're working or teleconferencing. And the other thing is, if you're buying a Bluetooth headset, if you're getting a Bluetooth headset, make sure that it has a good battery life, so that you don't need to charge it like in the middle of the day, just because the battery has worn off. So I decided to go with my headset because it has this nice feature that it's Bluetooth by default, but it still has a wired connection, a jack cable, so that even when Bluetooth fails, for example, you cannot pair it with your computer, you can still use the cable to connect it to the computer, and it's gonna work. So yeah, but there are other choices available, like Sony or other headsets. I don't want to embrace any particular one. I just wanted to say that I'm very happy with mine. So this is something that I can recommend. Okay. And then we were talking about headsets, but the other part of your teleconferencing setup is a decent internet connection at home. And if you can get fiber to the home, if you can get fiber connection, this is something that you should totally go for, because there's no better way to get internet access nowadays. In my area where I live, I'm living in the Warsaw suburbs. We used to have copper connection from Orange, Neostrada. That's quite popular, I guess. And it was only 10 megabytes per second. So this was barely usable for teleconferencing, but it worked. And then a local telecom company came up with this fiber to the home solution, and that's what I took. I wouldn't recommend relying on 4G only, because nowadays, especially when people are working from, learning from home, this is a very overcrowded mean of getting internet access, and you can probably use it as a fallback, as a backup plan. But if you can grab something wired, that will help. Okay, so many of you probably use VPN to connect to your corporate networks. So before you start working from home, it's really good to test the VPN. Nowadays, probably if you're already working from home, you already know if it works or not. But if you ever started working from home again, then this is on my checklist to see if I can connect to the corporate virtual private network, and I check it before I actually start working from home. And then, well, that might not be that important for many people, but still, I think it's another thing that when you're at the office, you know where the coffee machine is usually. So understand how to get coffee at home. That's what's worth remembering as well. And if you're not drinking coffee, maybe you're drinking tea or yerba mate. Well, get your supplies at home and make sure that you're aware of the level of the supplies, so that you don't run out of them. Okay, so how to work from home? My idea is that I start early, not that early, not 4:30 a.m., but the earlier the better. Why is that so? Because you don't want to be interrupted, and usually in the morning it's the easiest way to not be interrupted. You won't get many teleconferences at 5 or 6 a.m., right? Your kids will probably be asleep at 5 or 6 a.m. And this is more of a personal taste. Some people just don't like waking up in the morning, and that's completely fine. They're doing late hours, and that's completely fine. But my point here is that it's really good to find some slice of the day when you're sure that no one will interrupt you, when you can go into deep work, when you can start focusing, and you know that, like, you've got maker's time for 2 hours, 2.5 hours, when you can just go down into a very focused state of your mind, and nothing will interrupt you. This is really useful to have this kind of slice. Then the other thing, since you're not in the office, you're not sitting by someone else. Asynchronous communication is the main way of communicating with your teammates in the setup. So you need to embrace it. Use email, use wikis. You can use Confluence to write things down, to discuss them. But on the other hand, if a quick call is possible, I would rather use a quick call instead of explaining things over email or over Slack. Why is that so? Because written communication is like 90% less effective than face-to-face communication. And that's because most of our human communication is actually nonverbal. And it's usually easier and faster to explain something over a video call than over hundreds of emails. So if you know that the person that you want to communicate with is available for a call, propose a call. And if they agree, you'll get things done much more faster. Okay, So then the other thing about chat is that I believe it's a bit like the chat channel, like in Slack channel. It's somewhat like a day-long meeting without set purpose and without limits. So it's very blurry communication, and that might be tiresome because you want to keep up with everything that happens on the channel, but on the other hand, you want to focus on your work. So it's really very much like email, right? So I prefer to check my email at specific points of the day instead of just having it hovering somewhere on my desktop, because, well, I get defocused really quickly with these kind of things. So yeah, and again, the good thing here is to observe yourself and figure out if this is something that interrupts you or not. Then a recommendation for teams. I have learned that allowing the longer daily is really helpful for distributed teams. And it's okay if it's not the usual quarter. It's okay if it takes even twice as much time, because during the daily, one thing is that people explain and a lot of things like the plan for the next day and so on and so forth. All the agile part of the ceremony is still in the meeting, but then it allows for some social interactions between distributed or remote team members, and this is very important for a team to keep this. Keep those social interactions. Okay, move on. Be clear about your availability. This is just being nice to your team members. If you need to leave your work spot for some time, that depends on your particular agreements in the team and with your employer, but still, being clear is just about your availability when you start your work, when you finish your work, when you're leaving your work spot for some time. I guess it's okay to leave for to grab a coffee or something like that. That's not something that you want to communicate. But if you're going to leave for something like more than half an hour because you need to see the doctor or you need to take care of your kids because they need some help with remote learning or anything like that, write about it to the chat or send an email about it. It's okay. I guess most of the time it will be okay if you communicate it. So that people know what is happening with you and why are you not answering, for example, on Slack. Okay. I've mentioned that before. The nonverbal communication is most of the communication when people communicate. So over text, it's really hard to convey emotions and intentions. So a good thing is to assume positive intentions when reading emails, when using text-based communication. And then the other thing that I've learned, it's really good to be understanding about others' people availability because they've got kids, they've got pets at home, they've got other responsibilities. So it's really good to understand that in the current situation, they've got some other responsibilities as we do, as every one of us has, right? So positive intentions and understanding really helps to build this well-being of the team. Okay, then this is something that I've learned a long time ago. In a case of a team that is only partially distributed, so some people are working in the office, the other are satellites that are working remote. This was something that we actually learned in some other team that I worked for. So initially the setup was that there was a core team of 3-4 guys that were working in the same, that were collocated, and some of us were working remotely. So they were, when we had a teleconference, they were going to a conference room, and they were using that conference gear, like a huge display and the camera that was showing everyone in the room and so on. And then we were joining from our laptops, and then it really sucked. And the reason for that was that either one of the remote guys was feeling like being closed off because he didn't hear something that people in the conference room were talking about, or some of the people in the room were drifting away from the meeting because they brought their own laptops and they were coding on that on the meeting and so on. So just to level the experience for everyone, it is something that we've read about in Trello's guide for remote work. So they recommended that if someone on the call is remote, joining from their laptop, everyone should do that. Everyone on the call should, just to level the experience so that everyone has the same experience. And we tried that, and it actually helped with the communication in our team. So even though guys were sitting collocated in the same room, they joined for the daily, each one of them from their own laptop, and that worked fine. Okay, the other thing, well, that's actually something that I would recommend to everyone, not only to our distributed team, but it's really good to write things down. And that means pretty much anything that is more or less important, like decisions on your design, the onboarding process, and so on and so forth. When people are in the office, it's much easier to get into this tribal knowledge that accumulates in the company. When people are distributed, this is so much harder. So if you write things down and they are written, well, then you of course need to add some structure to it. And I've heard about horrors of corporate wikis that are not updated and so on and so forth, but still, any information is still better than no information. And one thing that I want to close this with is you shouldn't be worried about your productivity, because in the beginning, when you start working from home, it's probably going to drop because you need to adapt to a new situation. You need to figure out your daily rituals and so on and so forth. One thing that might probably help with that is something that I mentioned before, a separate work spot that you devote to work-only related stuff. Having things like daily rituals. In my case, it's a coffee in the morning with my wife, and having a breakfast with my kids. And then everyone understands that when I'm done with my breakfast in the morning, then I'm off to work. And that's it. And if I wake before them and do some work in the morning, then I have my own personal ritual, which is coffee all by myself. Okay. And then, since you might be worried about your productivity, you will be tempted to stay up long. And this is a huge no-no. And definitely shouldn't stay up long, because this will hit your productivity even more if you're not getting proper sleep. So, yeah. And if you think that's a huge thing, a huge problem, maybe you should talk to your manager or agile coach if you have one at your company. Just speak about it, and that's really important to get some help in that case. Okay, so common issues and how to deal with them. One of the most common issues that people report is that people feel lonely when they work remotely. So this is completely natural, and this is what happens. And what we have found at least two different remote or distributed teams to help is finding a replacement for water cooler conversations. So we have in the team that I am in right now at Spartus, we have a coffee table, so-called coffee table call once a week. For half an hour, we grab a coffee or tea or whatever you like, and we just talk about anything we want to talk about. So this helps to bring the team together, and that's one thing. But it also helps the members of the team to have these social interactions. Okay. The other issue that people can complain about is lack of work-life balance, and it actually can happen both ways. So you can feel like the work overwhelms you, or you can feel that life creeps into your work. And I already mentioned that my way of dealing with that is starting and ending the workday with something that marks the limits. So having a ritual both for start and for the end of the workday, that's something that it helps switch the mind between the two modes. Okay. Feeling of lowered productivity, I've already mentioned that before. So to sum it up, 3 things: maker's time, when you can devote yourself to deep work, to focused work, when you know that you won't be interrupted. Start early or work late, but don't do both at the same time. And then be ruthless in declining meetings. That's something that I've learned really helps as well, because when you don't filter the meetings that you're getting invited to, you can easily end up with a full day of calls and no work done. So every time I get an invitation for a non-team meeting, I try to answer myself, do I really need to attend it? Is this really required from me to attend this meeting? And I usually get in touch with the organizer of the meeting and ask them if they really require my attendance, because maybe this is something that could be dealt with in some other way, like writing an email or composing an article on company Confluence, so that I can pass my knowledge without actually attending the meeting. Okay. Some people say that they have issues with getting focused, and in my case, I found out that it helps me to enter the flow state when I have some particular music in the background, and that's what I do. I just have a playlist that helps me to achieve this state, and it immediately kicks in. Okay, kids interrupting work. So this is probably something that you've seen before. This is a CNN reporter from or CNN expert from South Korea, being interrupted while interviewed by CNN or BBC. Oh, that doesn't really matter. But while explaining the intricacies of South Korean politics, being interrupted by a kid. So this is something that you probably are not. That's probably not possible to avoid completely, but there is actually some way to partially deal with that. First of all, talk to your kids and explain to them that when, for example, the doors to your room is shut, it means that you're on a call and you shouldn't be interrupted. Get kids involved. So this is something that I saw people at GitLab did. So that they got their kids involved to prepare those 2 signs. X means that I'm currently having a call. I cannot be interrupted. O means that it's fine to walk into the room and grab a piece of paper, for example, or grab a pencil, right? And this is something that a kid prepared, so it helps them to get engaged with this. Okay, we've mentioned something like secret keywords. So my secret keyword for today is focus. And that really helps. Focusing on focus will help you excel at work from home. And now to Q&A.
Okay. Thank you, Maciej, for the presentation. Basically, the keyword that appeared in the end can be used if you subscribe to the event on Spartans.com, Java Webinar Week. We have a special game related to that. And now I have some questions for you. Let's start from one thing that I think is very important, and we didn't talk a lot about that during the presentation. Poker King asked, well, he actually said that he works remotely temporarily, and at the end of the week, he runs out of power to working, and he doesn't know the reason behind that. Do you know similar cases, maybe in the history of your team? It's probably related to motivation.
Yeah, I suppose I can talk about my own experience. I know what you're talking about. So I suppose the most common reason for having this feeling is not enough social interactions. It depends a lot on a type of personality. I myself am an extrovert, so I really feel like I need to talk to people. And what I have found to be helpful is, well, not in the pandemics times, but in my case, I've found that it helps me to attend conferences as a speaker and do all the networking stuff every now and then. So, for example, last year I attended something like 6 or 7 conferences. So every 2 months, I was out there talking to people, meeting new people, and this really helped me to charge my batteries and not have this feeling of like being depleted. But yeah, well, what I would really recommend is first get to know yourself, understand yourself, and understand what kind of personality you are, what drives you, and then try to adjust. And that's very general, I know, but I think this is the key to getting help with that. And understanding yourself is just the thing.
Okay. About understanding yourself, we have one question from a guy named Kot Palmowy. What do you think about working from home as a junior developer from the very beginning? Does it have impact on learning, and what's your opinion about that?
Oh, definitely it does. I mean, it makes well, there is some impact because again, I'm sorry. Switch.
Yeah, I can leave it that way.
Sure. Anyway, I prefer to think about software development as of a craft because it is somewhat like a craft. And in case of craft, you need to have a master and disciple, and it's really hard when you're working from home, right? But it is still possible. And well, when I was actually starting as a software developer, I was working as a freelancer, and most of that time it was working remotely for customers. So it is definitely doable, but again, you need to understand and you need to watch yourself if it helps you or not. Yeah, well, I think it really helps to work in the office when you're a junior, but is it crucial? That depends.
Okay. You mentioned that you worked as a freelancer in the beginning, and you were working remotely. Was it a work within a team? Because right now you are working as a team member. So in the beginning, was it more directly with the customer, or?
Yeah, directly with the customer. So I was the team basically.
Okay, I get it. Maybe this is the difference, because like in the beginning, when you don't have to communicate with each other, like you are the only person talking with customer, you don't have to use all the tooling, all the nomenclature that is needed to work with other developers.
Yeah.
I think it's.
Yeah. Well, I think in my case, it helped a lot to read things and to educate myself a lot. I think that was something that I was really pushing. So reading a book once a week, a technical book, and understanding it and applying it, and so on and so forth. I think it would be actually easier if I just started as a junior developer at some company working from the office. But it is doable. I believe this is doable.
Yeah, I had similar experience. So there is one question related to that. Do you feel you can learn less from more skilled people working remotely than working in the office? Working remotely means less technical discussions among teams in office space. So which way you prefer, like working in the office and learning from people on the fly, or learning remotely, like from async communication, maybe Confluence?
Well, again, that is something that you need. That's why I'm saying that understanding yourself is so important, because again, people are different kinds of learners. For example, I believe that I learn most effectively from books, not so much from videos, and maybe quite a lot from other people when we're interacting. But I've learned many things from reading books, and in my case, it worked. I'm not saying that it will work in everyone's case, right? Again, understanding yourself, this is something that you need to start with. And then I know that there are some people who prefer working in the office just because they can learn more from their teammates. And the other thing is being open about learning from other people, right? So not everyone is open, not everyone embraces it. So this is the other thing that you need to be aware of as well. So yeah, I know that I'm saying all the time, it depends, and learn yourself and so on, but it's really hard to give a general advice in such a topic, because it's really
you are giving a lot of context. So there is one interesting question about kind of setting the ground for the remote work. You already mentioned that it's better to have the video calls remotely. Łukasz Bełnicki is asking, like you mentioned teleconferences, but is there anything more worth taking care of if it comes to like remote work and like working the same rules, let's say?
I'm not sure if I understood it correctly. So, more taking anything worth taking more care, right?
Yeah, as like I understand this question in a way that like we are working remotely, like we have to synchronize sometimes. So you mentioned that if it comes to video conferences, it's good that everyone is working remotely for that purpose. So no situation where we have like three people in the room. Yeah. So this is one of the things that you mentioned will help to improve the quality of remote work. What about other things? Is there anything that we are missing here?
Oh, well, again, this is something that I think is overlooked a bit, but having these social interactions between team members, this is very, very important, so that people don't get to feel lonely, they don't lose their momentum. Yeah, well, the extreme that some people really use is having a daily chat for 15 minutes, like morning coffee when they gather together on a call and just chat about pretty much anything, just to have this social interaction. And I think that's completely fine. I think most of the remote work happens in the mind. So having a proper mindset and having a feeling of well-being is crucial here.
Okay, so you moved certain threads right now. First of all, having the most of the remote work is happening in the mind. Yeah. Do you have any special tools or techniques that help you organize yourself during the day?
Well, actually, there are some. Yeah. One thing that is worth. I mean, this is probably something that is obvious, but still worth mentioning: having a plan for a day. Like in my case, we I was working remotely before the pandemic started, but even the pandemic affected my work, my remote work, because my kids were going to the daycare before, and now they're not attending the daycare. So we came up with some kind of routine for every day, and we know that there are certain set points during the day. But you need to get involved, your household, in that as well. So your family members need to be involved in that, in setting this plan, so that everyone will obey it. So having this set points at this is the one thing, and the other thing that started, I wasn't doing it consciously. So I was doing it from time to time, but then I've learned that it's really something that is helpful, and I started doing it every day. Before I close the day, before I call it a day, I look into my calendar for the next day, and I think, what are the things that I'm going to do next day? So I'm just preparing this mini daily with myself, doing this kind of reflection on what is coming on the next day. I think it's helpful as well. And yeah, well, it also allows you to close the day, because, there are some certain things that I haven't finished today. That's completely fine. I'm going to work on them the next day, and your subconscious mind will stop thinking about it, will stop bothering about it, and then you can improve your work-life balance with that as well. So you stop the work from creeping into your life after work.
Okay, so let's continue the threads of improving the mind. You mentioned those two books in the beginning. Was it like a remote from Jason Fritz, or?
Yeah, the remote.
And the first one, I don't remember.
Required. That was a year in the pants.
Okay.
I'm sorry, a year without pants. Yeah.
Okay. Do you remember any other books like that you tried, but for example, you just throw it away because it was bullshit?
Well, not really. I mean, in case of those two books, or maybe not. There's one more thing that I would recommend, but rather to team managers, or to teams, to people who work in a team, but team managers especially. That's the Trello's Guide to Remote Work. If you Google it, you will find it. This is something that helped a lot when we were setting a remote team at Vaadin, when I was working remotely for Vaadin, and it is really a good read, and it's not that long. So This is something that I would probably actually start with because it's a short read, not so long as those books.
Okay, that's actually a very interesting topic right now, because like you mentioned that the last book is kind of dedicated for management, or did I get it right?
Not really. I mean, this is a leaflet, not a book.
Okay.
But it really helps to. I think it helps managers to set the stage right, because there are some. Well, it contains some data. It contains some things to convince people. So I think it's worth looking into.
Okay, so related to that, I have a kind of hard question. Right now, we are all working remotely. Do you have any ideas what to say to your manager if you want to continue this thread? Like pandemic ends, and what to tell to your boss if you want the remote work to continue after the pandemic ends?
Well, I would start with the question. Is there any pro for working from home that your boss can understand? For example, it makes you more productive, because there are some people who are more productive when they're working from home, or it makes you, your productivity is not worse, but it makes you feel better, or anything like that. So you need to have something to convince your boss. So I would start with looking at it, and then just ask, why not? I mean, the perfect remote setup is affecting the rest of the team. That's for sure. So this is something that is not going to be smooth for the rest of your team if you want to work remotely, and that's something that you need to keep in mind as well. If you want to have a productive, happy, well-behaving remote team, or a team with a remote member, the whole team needs to change, and probably the whole company needs to change to accommodate for that. So it might be a bit of an uphill battle, but still, I believe that right now the understanding of remote work, because it's forced, but because remote work is forced, the understanding of it changes, and we start to understand that there are lots of things that we can do remotely. Like, for example, we can do shopping remotely. We can work remotely. We can have family get-togethers remotely. We can have weddings remotely. That's what people do, right? So, of course, this is not something that, not everything is something that you would want to do over a Zoom call, right? But working remotely, I think this is the understanding of remote work is going to change. So, yeah.
Okay, sounds great. Yeah, I kind of wanted to finish with this question, but I see that we have more. So if we have extra 10 minutes, we probably can get the list to 0. But
my kids are already asleep, so no worries.
Yeah. Okay, but so going back from those like very important, very how to say it, kind of pathetic questions, like because discussing with boss and setting the company culture, it sounds really serious. So let's go back to the shape of the team. Like, if we are doing a remote team, if you are making a remote team and we have a team that is not remote, what are the crucial differences that you feel are important? I mean, what are the differences between remote teams and teams that are not remote?
Well, there's lots of differences, but I think the most important one is the style of the communication in the team. I mean, this is something that people need to learn because we are naturally not distributed, and we learn in classes, right? when we go to the university, we've got our group of students and so on. And when you're working in a team that is usually collocated. So I think the most important difference is the style of the communication. Like in a distributed team, the communication is much more verbose, just to avoid any misconceptions and misunderstandings. So if you're setting up a new team or you're making a collocated team distributed, I would pay attention to that, to make the communication much more verbose and much more, well, the thing is, with remote team, you cannot over communicate. And that's worth keeping in mind.
Okay. I wanted to ask about one extra thing related to that. Like, if we have a team, we probably have a product or some projects to complete. Can you match the given shape of the team with kind of the code that we are working with on a daily basis?
Oh, so that's a good one. Actually, there is Conway's law. So every single product will reflect, software product will reflect the communication in the organization that produces this software. So I would put it in the reverse direction. Be aware that the way the team works will affect the code base. But I think there are distributed teams that are working with all kinds of code, and it shouldn't really matter. So front-end code, back-end code, embedded code, systems code. Like the one of the most important systems code, which is the Linux kernel, is developed by a distributed team asynchronously, right?
Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask, because if we have some kind of legacy code base, isn't it better that everything is written down and you can actually search how to do things than having a lot of tribal knowledge?
Of course. I mean, tribal knowledge is something that you want to get rid of, actually. The less, the better, because this directly affects your buzz factor. So if there is anything that can affect the execution of your project, like, I don't know, one particular developer that knows everything about the system and so on and so forth, this is a really bad situation for you if you run a project, right? Or if you're a manager, you don't want to end up in this kind of situation. So it actually matters even if the team is collocated, in my opinion. And it's just a set of good engineering practices that you write things down, that you document your decisions, that you avoid storing the knowledge only in people's brains, right?
Yeah, I agree. Related to that, if we are, you mentioned the buzz factor, yeah? So if the buzz hits one of your team members, what are the chances that your project will survive, yeah? Yeah. How many people should have been hit by buzz to kill your project? What about recruitation? Because if it comes to like having a team, is one thing is having the team, and second thing is actually making the team grow, or let's say replace the people that are deciding to quit, for example. What are your thoughts about the remote recruitment process?
So actually, I was recruited remotely, both to Vaadin and at least partially to Spartas. I think it is actually possible to recruit people over a Zoom call. You need to have some tools, and you need to have a good sieve at the beginning of the recruitment process. But at least at Vaadin, we recruited people remotely from all parts of the world, and everything happened remotely. So, and we built a great team there. So that's definitely doable. And well, what I think helps quite a bit with remote recruitment is some kind of automated tasks, coding tasks at the beginning of the recruitment process, just to make sure that, well, it's my personal opinion, right? But I think that that's something that really helps to sieve out people that you don't want to enter the process anyway. So, and it's very useful because it actually means that you're not involving your developers into that, right? So this is something that it runs automated, and that's it, right? You need to review the scores, but it's still better than having a coding call in the beginning. Some kind of screening is really required, in my opinion.
Okay. Yeah, I totally agree with what you said. Like, we switched the recruitment process in Spartans already. Yeah, right now we are recruiting most of the team remotely. That's fun part. Like, the recruitation didn't stop. I'm looking at the list of the questions. So I see no more questions arriving at the list. There are some small questions about the equipment, like do I need two monitors on my desk or not, etc. I will leave those because I believe that you answered those in your presentation, mentioning like the setup and that you have to take care about basically about yourself, your body and mind. So that's already answered.
Yeah, maybe I could add one thing here. A general side note is that you need to understand what is your setup that you're using at work and try to replicate it at home. Not everything is possible, but if you have an additional display at work, why not have one at home? If you don't have room for that, well, that's understandable. But if you have room, then why not? If it makes you more productive, and I believe it helps, then go for it. Anything that makes you more productive.
That's basically it. So yeah, and the last words, summarizing what we talked about today.
Well, remote work is hard. It's easy, but it's still work, basically. So
you should add, it depends.
No. I mean, it makes some things easier and it makes some things harder. It's just a trade-off, right? So I wouldn't dare to say that it's better or worse than working from the office. It's just different. But the important thing to remember is that it is still work. And
Great.
That's it.
Thank you very much. Tomorrow we will meet at the same time with Alek Mierzwicki and Michał Michalczuk. Alek will talk about how to become a cloud developer if you are a Java developer. So stay tuned. I remember that we had a lot of questions related to cloud development, so I expect the Q&A session will be a bit longer than usually. We will see. Once again, Maciek, thank you for your presentation. Thank you all for your attention, for all the questions that we had. And yeah, have a nice evening. See you guys.
Thank you for your time. Bye.